We have LaRue, pronouns are she, her in Illinois, wants to talk about, is it sociopathic to believe a particular thing about God? Welcome, LaRue. How are you?
Hi. Pretty good. Um, so I had a relative who someone said something to him. He had a fight with his sister, and then it was his sister's father-in-law. He told his sister, "I'm so angry, I'm going to kill you." And then the father-in-law called up and said, "If you hurt Susan, I'll kill you." And then years later, the man's son, they were electricians, and his son died because I think he wasn't handling the wires properly. And he thinks that the man's son died because of what he said to him. He said, some people who are going to hell anyway are just bodies to be used to avenge him. And I was wondering, I had an argument with a relative that said that's not sociopathic, and she said you need to ask a psychiatrist. But I just wanted to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, sociopathic is difficult because I mean that's not really like a well, I guess it used to be some sort of diagnostic term if I'm understanding that correctly, but I may be wrong. Please correct me in the chat if you happen to know. But I mean, like, I think it's better to just focus on, is that a fucked up thing to do? Because then the answer is clearly yes. If you're trying to say, is it sociopathic, it gets a little muddier, and I feel like it obfuscates from the reality of the situation, which is it's abusive, it's wrong, it treats people like they're objects, and that's not okay. I think when you get on the sociopathic thing, yeah, it becomes a little too muddy. But I don't know, Matt, what do you think?
Well, I'm not in a position where I'm going to actually be trying to diagnose someone, but I think that given the norms about how we use language like that, I don't think it would be that far off to say that something like that qualifies as somewhat sociopathic.
In a colloquial sense, sure.
Yeah, but not as I'm not going to be diagnosing anybody. But I think that the problem is that whether or not it qualifies as sociopathic or not is almost irrelevant. It's something that all of us, or nearly all of us, would and should find problematic or undesirable or bad in a colloquial sense of, like, oh, if anybody did this to me, that would be bad. So why is it all of a sudden good when there's supposedly a God doing it? And quite often what we see are they want to claim, oh, well, because God is, the ultimate arbiter of right and wrong, and therefore whatever God does must be right. And I don't think that really flies. But I don't know what else to say about it. Is it a bad thing? Yeah, as far as I can tell, it's awful. But I don't know that means. I don't know what we get by calling it sociopathic at all.
Right. Well, sociopaths see people as objects. So, and this isn't the only time one time he thought someone's wife had a stroke because they made an ill-considered remark to him. I mean, this is not normally what Christians believe. I know they wouldn't.
Yeah, I think you got to be careful with something like sociopaths believe people are objects, because like antisocial personality disorder is a really complex disorder, and there are some people who might have like the inability to experience empathy on an emotional level, but can logic their way to empathy, and it becomes like that's kind of, I think, the point we're getting at, is that I totally hear you, and you're just basically what you're trying to communicate is that if that were true, that's super fucked up and God shouldn't be that way. But it doesn't really provide any utility to describe it that way. I think it's more useful to just point out that that's like inconsiderate and manipulative and abusive types of behavior. And if it were coming from a human being, you could probably like litigate on those grounds. But because, as Matt pointed out, it's from God, we're supposed to think of it as like judgment, divine judgment, or something of that effect. But I totally hear you, and I think it is fucked up. And I think in a colloquial sense, if you're just kind of like joking with friends and being like, wow, God's a sociopath, like, sure, you can say that, and we all know what you mean.
But at the end of the day, you can just say, if anybody else did this or tried to do this, we would all object. I don't, whether or not we call it sociopathic or not. And trust me, I've had relatives who viewed God as if God was the avenger who's going to come and right the wrongs that have been done to people, despite the fact the Bible doesn't. And they were Christian. I don't want to say everybody is, but they were a Bible believer, and the Bible doesn't even advocate for that. But depending on which God they're talking about, if they're really just trying to use God as like a tool for what they hope would be vengeance, they're almost talking something closer to karma.
Yeah.
And at that point, it would depend on what was right and what was just rather than revenge, because, taking out a bad guy may be a just thing. But hopefully that answers it a little bit. I don't know if there's much more to add to it, though, LaRue.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Matt and Arden.
Yeah,
Thanks so
thanks
much.
for calling.